Pickaxe.
And welcome back to the Review of Death, a Doctor Who podcast and your fortnightly home for Doctor Who news and reviews, as hosted by a pair of miserable bastards, myself, Matthew Toffolo, and my good friend Billy Garratt-John. How are you doing, miserable bastard?
I'm fucking over it, mate. I'm fucking done. I can't stand this fucking TV show no more. I'm out of touch with what's going on. I fucking hate it. I don't hate it. No. But we thought today we might talk about something that I've always liked, and through the process of reviewing this and comsing with Matt over what we're going to do today, found out that this is the one miserable bastard podcast this week, quite possibly.
It is, yeah. We can't deviate too far away from type.
No, I mean, there's a reason that, the podcast has lasted as long as it has, and that's because, people like to hear
miserable
bastards.
Yeah. Someone said something like, at least you're not as bad as the podcasts that are like racist and homophobic and transphobic. And I was like,
at least we've cleared that bar.
Yeah, at least we're not, well, okay, thank you. So welcome. Today is the 4th of July. If you're listening in the UK, it's a big day because it's the general election. And we thought that go out and vote if you haven't done it because it's incredibly important.
It's a bit late now. Oh, no, actually, it might not be.
Yeah, but if you're listening to this in the morning on your way to work, then you've got time to do it. And actually, doesn't it polls open till like 10 o'clock?
Yes, they usually are. And if you're doing a postal vote or proxy vote, I think... No, don't listen to me because I might give you false information and prevent you from. He's not
even in the country anymore. So.
I'm not. I've done my postal vote. That was like an interesting thing to do.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And are you going to be in the country for it, or
I am,
have you left by now?
No. Okay. I am currently in the country at the time of this going out because we're recording this in the past. Yes, so if you haven't voted, go and vote. And because we thought, well, what can we do Doctor Who themed to do with politics? And we thought we'll talk about the Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords because of Mr Saxon, the best Prime Minister we never had.
Clearly.
Yes.
Now, is he a Tory or is he a Labour boy?
Oh, he's Tory, surely.
You reckon?
Yeah, he's rubbing shoulders with Anne Widdecombe, so... Surely,
yeah, that's true. She does give him a ringing endorsement.
Yeah, surely they must be Tories.
And I would put Sharon Osbourne down as a Tory, if only for like the lack of taxes you have to pay at that bracket.
Yeah.
But the one that confuses me is McFly, or maybe they just don't know who they're talking to.
I mean, yeah, I just think they're probably totally devoid of any knowledge about politics. Especially that one that goes, go Harry,
go on Harry. I know, I love that. You can tell that they've kind of got that footage back and gone, oh, for fuck's sake, we can't ignore that, can we? We might as well do a close up on his face.
On that gurning face.
I can't remember who that is. I think that's Dougie. I think that's Dougie.
Right.
I mean,
anyway. I didn't know who they were at the time, so.
Oh, come on, McFly were the best. I bloody love McFly.
What did they sing? Give me a McFly.
They sang I Nearly Shagged My Mum. No, they did they did
Marty McFly, very good.
They did.
Very good.
They did I'm travelling with an old man who smells a bit and his dog.
Sorry, Tom Baker and K9.
Yeah. No, they did Girl with 5 Colours in Her Hair, Room on the 3rd Floor. It's about all I can remember, really. My uncle was their sound engineer for a long time. I think still does tour with them.
Oh, right. Interesting.
Did a tour in South America or something recently, which is quite nice with them.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, let's talk about this episode because, like I said in the intro, I've always held this up quite highly. And of all the season finales we've already done, so with the exception of Parting of the Ways and Bad Wolf, I would put this up as my favourite new series finale.
Wow. Interesting. What,
historically.
Above Doomsday?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I thought, as, seasoned Doctor Who fans, the prospect of Daleks versus Cybermen has always been a tantalising one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can really make that the entire reason to do that story.
Right.
But I've always thought of it and gone, it's a shame we didn't have a bit more of that or a bit more of this. And,
yeah.
It seems rushed, that aspect of it, considering it's always been who would win in a fight.
Yes, that is true. But that seems to be the way with a lot of its finales, that the bit that you really want to see is the bit that we don't ever get enough of, like Sutek.
Sutek. It will be interesting to see how many parallels we can draw between the two of them.
Yes, yeah. Now, I watched this in the week between The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Is that her name? And I've forgotten her name already. It's only been a week. I watched that between the both halves of the series of the episodes airing, and it was interesting. It was interesting, like you said, comparing notes between finales. Obviously, I didn't realize how much of a crushing disappointment the Sutek episode was going to be. But don't know. Maybe I felt the same about this story. So let's kick it off. Sound of Drums. So we've had Utopia. We're not talking about Utopia. Now, technically, it is a three-parter, but we thought that for the sake of this political agenda episode of the Review of Death, we would only do the latter two parts. And I think Utopia works as a standalone episode, to be honest.
And I think there's enough going on in that we can talk about it another time, and it will stand up on its own. But for this one, we wanted to concentrate on these two because you can watch them in isolation. There's a nice flashback to, previously on Doctor Who. And that was one of the things that struck me first watching it and watching it again now, is how well that sort of unseen flashback where the future kind are trying to get through the door and they're faffing with Jack's vortex manipulator, and how good all that stuff is and how great the opening sort of 10-15 minutes of this episode are in ramping up the stakes. And I think it's because we've never had a lead in to a finale like this before.
No.
So we'll talk about Utopia another time, but I thought the way that they transition from Utopia into this really works, and for the most part this opening episode really nails it.
I completely agree. I really enjoy the first half. To be fair, I enjoy most of this story. It's when we get to the end that it kind of falls apart for me. But I really do love this first episode. I think it does a very good job of, like you said, raising the stakes, setting everything up. I think it's such a clever idea having the Master hidden in plain sight throughout all this time. And, obviously we've had little nods to Mr. Saxon and all this stuff going on. Is it as far back as series 2? Did we get a Mr. Saxon reference?
Yeah, I think quite possibly,
and there's certainly one in Torchwood series 1. There's a poster, Mr. Saxon poster, Vote Saxon. So I mean, I actually, although I can see what you're saying about the lead in from Utopia, I kind of feel like he's one of those cliffhanger resolutions that feels like a bit of a cheat, because it's almost like they've put them in such dire straits that is like, how the hell are they ever going to get out of this? And it's like, I'll just buzz it with the sonic screwdriver and we escaped. But how else are you going to do that sort of thing?
Totally. And I think we've got enough to be cracking on with that you have to kind of park that, and it's not as egregious as, it's a different kind of cliffhanger cheat to say like Image of the Fendal, where the context of these other shots absolutely changes what's happening in the previous,
completely,
in the cliffhanger.
Totally agree.
So we arrive on Earth and
at the bins.
The Masters, around the back of the bins, and that this whole the setting for this episode where they're on the run and they're watching the TV and we're cutting to the action inside Downing Street and all the references as well to like past episodes.
Yeah.
This is like a distillation of what Russell does really well, I think, is all of the, right through series 1, series 2, series 3, and series 4, but I think maybe to a lesser degree. because that season has a kind of standalone arc that isn't referenced previously.
No.
And feels a little bit less solid, the foundations of. It just all feels like it's happened within 2 years, 18 months, 3 years. All of these pieces have fallen into place over this time. And the world feels so real that when the Doctor, Martha, and Jack get, put up as enemy number one, public enemy number one, and wanted criminals, and they're trying to exist in this world without being detected, it feels real. And all of the justifications, like the Master's plan is basically, you've been lied to about alien incursions over the past 2 years. And he references all the things that have happened, the Slitheen ship crashing into Big Ben and the star in the night sky that rained death down upon us.
Oh yeah, that was the first Mr. Saxon reference, wasn't it? In Runaway Bride, yeah.
Because he gets into power for his reaction on the day to destroying the star.
Yeah.
And all of it just makes sense. Like, the Master's mesmeric influence is one thing.
Yeah.
To kind of explain how he's been able to get where he is and has gone undetected and all of that stuff. But then the justification for why people would vote for him when he does his speech, we're going to have first contact and you've been lied to this whole time.
Yeah.
Is a very, it's a reason to vote for him. I'm not a career politician. I've not grown up in this, and I'm going to give the people what they want. It's perfectly pitched and it all makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's really good. The world feels, like you said, very, very real. I must go to one of the earliest lines from this story where the Doctor says, "I'll know him the moment I see him. Time Lords always do, apart from all the other times when I didn't know it was him."
Yeah, and when I looked at that monitor and thought, is she my granddaughter? I just can't tell from here. I mean, Time Lords usually can tell. And considering the stuff that I'm saying was written by the guy who put that down in writing and in the canon, it's kind of shocking that I can't work out that that's not my granddaughter. Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that basically for the first half of the first episode, the Doctor and the Master have zero contact. And obviously he's regenerated off screen.
Yep.
And you are waiting for that moment where they finally meet in person.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really nice idea to keep building to that.
Yeah.
To have the phone conversation between the two of them, which is an absolute highlight of the story.
It's a fantastic scene. That whole sequence of them on the phone is brilliant. But before we get to that, let's talk about Mr. Saxon. Let's talk about the Master. So he's got a wife.
Yes.
Is that a sneaky little reference about his beard? Because I know
yes,
Stephen Moffat
absolutely.
doesn't he?
I think it is.
Time Crash,
yeah, almost certainly. I mean, even just the Doctor's reaction, his wife.
Yeah.
There's something going on there.
Yeah, which is great. That's good fun. Like you're saying, lots of little callbacks. He refers to Downing Street being rebuilt because they go to the cabinet room. And obviously we have the first big scene with the Master is that cabinet room scene. So what do you think of John Sims' Master?
I think it's a typical reaction to the Heath Ledger Joker. All the villains that you see in like media from this point on, although if this was shot in 2006, I don't know if it would have come out. I was
going to say, this was 2006 when it would have been shot, and 2007 when it came out. So it just comes out before Heath Ledger.
Okay, all
which
right.
is weird because in my mind, I always think the same thing, and I think a lot of people do. I think because it is that same sort of period. I think a lot of us always go, "Oh, he's a bit, he's riding that sort of thing," but he isn't. I mean, I personally, he's a bit too much for me. He's a bit OTT, a bit over the top. I think some bits when he gets to be more menacing, he's brilliant. But some of it is like uber camp, he's almost like Cesar Romero Joker from like the old Batman series. He's really sort of, I'm the baddie sort of thing, in big flashing lights. And I know that's what Russell wanted.
Yes. Yeah, I have to say, I don't mind it, especially in the early going. I think it gets a little bit grating towards the end of this episode, Sound of Drums in particular.
Yeah.
When he talks to the US president.
Yeah.
And he's still doing all the gurning and like zipping his mouth shut and all of that.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, okay, but you have got a plan to carry out, and you might blow it by acting like a fool.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of proves that he's in control no matter what, and he can get away with whatever he wants.
Because they made a big sort of point about having him be, the mirror image of David Tennant's Doctor. But I think he's like the mirror image of David's Doctor turned up to 11 a little bit, isn't he, really?
Yeah, I totally get that. I can see the comparison between the two, but I also buy his slight megalomania or kind of insaneness in this, because he has won finally.
Yeah.
And, especially in the second part, and he makes a big deal out of the fact of, I've waited to be able to. It does feel like everything the Master does, the way he tortures the Doctor and keeps him subservient and plays all the music and dances around and has the wife and is getting massages from people and all of that, as unmastery as that is to a degree, and that might just be Sim's performance, and he won't be trying to do a Delgado.
No.
Which is nice, he's doing his own thing at least. But it does feel cathartic from the Master's point of view. It's like, this is what it feels like to finally win, and like, I've got the Doctor under my thumb, like there's absolutely nothing that can stop me. This is great. I'm going to enjoy this. And I like that. Yeah,
I agree. He the way he revels in his victory is really well done. And the way he I do enjoy the way, especially in this opening scene with the politicians, when he kills them all off. It is good fun. You cannot deny that he's obviously having a good time, and it's kind of a joy to watch that whole thing with the gas mask, and it's great, isn't it?
And when he's not being performative and he hasn't got a crowd like the cabinet members that he gasses or the world's media or whatever it is, and in those moments where like he's drinking scotch on his own in the cabinet room watching Teletubbies, he is quiet and kind of menacing. He's like, I'm having my off time now. The plan is going ahead. You don't have to worry about it. And the way he is with Lucy Saxon, and I forget the name of the actress who plays Lucy Saxon, but she's great in this story.
Good.
She plays
very good.
The kind of like a kind of, is it Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah, she's got that sort of Stockholm syndrome, isn't she? Yeah, but I guess again, it's that like the mesmeric influence of the Master starting to show its face, because she almost pulls away from it when she talks to the reporter, but then as soon as he enters the room, it sort of snaps her back in. And we've seen that before in classic Doctor Who. So it's a nice callback to that without having to be like sense. Proper, like, you will obey me eyeballs,
Exactly, because that wouldn't run now, the kind of, it's almost like the snake in Jungle Book levels of kind of daft hypnosis when you look at it back then. But her arc makes sense, right? Because you can tell that she's conflicted from the start, and that hypnotic influence is starting to sort of waver. And then when at the end, the Doctor has his biblical moment, and she whispers his name. Yeah, you think, that doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like it's come out of nowhere. Like she has been. She is the kept wife. She's almost like a mobster's wife trying to get out of a really nasty situation. It's really nicely written, and she's fantastic.
Yeah, it's very clever. You feel like she has naturally been pushed too far, and the Master, probably just sees her as a plaything. But he's bent just a bit too much, and now
like the way she dresses and all of that, and all of that starts that kind of slight questioning of whether or not she should be in the situation starts with the Vivian Rook stuff, which is a great scene.
Yes.
All those bits put together. And, you know, he didn't exist 18 months ago. And I forget the name of the lady who plays Vivian Rook, but she was at the last Pandorica that we went to together.
Yeah, she was
and
so good.
She's quite the fucking raconteur, isn't she?
Yes. Yeah. She did the scream, didn't she? Did she do the scream for us? Yeah.
That was great.
She said something like, "Oh, I've got a reputation for being able to do this or something." But
so says my husband.
Yeah,
it was a great way of doing the hypnosis thing, but not making it, you know, look into my eyes, not around my eyes, not around my eyes, into my eyes. You're under. You know, it was a nice way of making the Master's gimmick come across without it being cheesy.
Yeah, and they keep making the Doctor keeps making references about him, sort of that mesmerism. There's another bit that I'd sort of forgotten actually in that cabinet room scene after he's killed them all. The rapping on the table and how deranged he looks.
He looks shot away.
Yeah, and I saw it and I was like, now, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a long time ago, as much as it pains me to say, but was that in that All the Strange Creatures trailer that was on the red button? Do you remember that? Can you remember pressing the red button to get the full Series 3 trailer?
I must have done. I don't remember if it was in it, but it's a lasting image from this season, isn't it? Like, I remember people doing it in school. The rapping on the table.
Yeah.
You know?
And I watching it back, I thought, I wish we'd have had just a little bit more of that sort of quiet, you know, quite macabre. I mean, gas masks are horrible anyway, as we know from Empty Child. So it just makes, and he's like, if his face is like sort of pulled to one side, and it's just it's a gruesome image,
glazed over. It's great. John Sim, I have to say, I think is grand, considering the fact he's not done shows like this traditionally, and you know he's coming off the back of Life on Mars being such a big success.
And that's how I knew him. I loved him in Life on Mars. Oh, I still do. But I remember when it was announced that he was going to be the Master, or it was rumoured that he was going to be the Master, I was like, oh, he's going to be superb. But then I was quite surprised by the way that he played it in the end. But, you know, that's the way it is.
He could have camped it up even more. I think he's just at that level where he's still acting through the kind of villain that Russell is writing here is, you know, the kind of shot away, you know, giggly, daft villain.
Yeah.
But he brings enough menace to it. And it's interesting to see how he obviously develops over the course of his appearances on the show, where I think he's reached a point now where he's just sort of playing it a lot straighter.
Yes.
But that twinkle...
There's still the twinkle, isn't there?
Yeah, and you feel like the events from the end of time actually have had an influence on how he's taking himself more seriously when he appears in the Capaldi era.
Yeah.
You know, it's a nice arc that he's kind of gone through there. It's
really cool. You know, I'd love to, well, I don't know if I would like to see him come back under Russell, but, you know, it was nice seeing him under a different writer. And it's a shame almost that we didn't get a bit more of him under Moffat. That might have been quite nice. But he like you said, he does work very well when he comes back in that Cyberman story. Yes. So we've talked about the reporter scene, which, like you said, is great. There's some like really cool synthy music that plays under that sequence, which I'd never noticed before in all the times that I've watched it. And I was like, gosh, you know, it's unusual for sort of Murray at this time to be going quite synthy as he did, but it felt very old school Doctor Who, which is, you know, and always fun.
It is, and quite jarring to hear Torchwood elements in the script in the score as well. And I will say, the Series 3 soundtrack has always been my favourite. I think this is Murray's top year, you know, with the exception maybe of Series 5. He's got some great stuff in Series 5. Yeah. But this is the soundtrack I listened to the most as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, All the Strange Creatures is just fantastic. Yeah. The Gallifrey piece, which we'll obviously get to. Yeah, really, really good.
That oboe piece that plays when they're on the run, because it does feel kind of melancholic. You know, it's like, wow, you know, we've not encountered this situation before where the Doctor's had to go dark, and the Doctor's he can't be like the swashbuckling, coat swishing hero. He has to lie low.
Yeah.
And there is something kind of sad in that, because that's not typically how the Doctor saves the day. So because they have to avoid detection, he has to go about this a different way. And oddly, though, I think, and also on Murray's score, that there are a couple of moments that aren't scored, which I think is quite nice. Which adds to the kind of heavy feeling of this is a finale and the stakes are raised, and we should be paying attention to what's going on. David Tennant, talking of the Doctor and his sort of influence on the story, it feels oddly absent from this two-parter, and I don't just mean because he's under prosthetics and becomes the little Gollum Doctor in the second part. But it doesn't feel like it's his story. He's as much of a passenger trying to figure this out and fix it as Martha is. And obviously Martha ends up being the hero of the story, really. But the Doctor, even from that first episode, feels like he's sort of second fiddle to... He's just part of the team. He's not really leading from the front,
Yeah, this is John Sims' episode, He's the title character almost for this episode. And talking about like the whole sort of ensemble thing, we get to see the build up of all of that stuff with Martha's mum. She'd been conniving behind the scenes with Saxon's people, seeds that were planted way back in the Lazarus experiment. So again, nice to see that sort of come to fruition. And that's a great sequence, all that, that whole thing of having her mum and then her dad like under house arrest with the heavies there. And then the shootout in the street. I'd forgotten all of this. And it's really great.
It feels real, that's always been Russell's strongest, strongest way of getting across that this is an important thing that's happening is the involvement of the family, and the way that they all kind of come together at the end. I love Martha's dad. Yeah. And I love the bit where he admits that they're being, kind of kept under observation and the calls being traced and all that. And the way that Francine just fucking gives out to him when he says yes and stands up from the table. Yeah. And she's not really that fussed about what happens to him because he's getting pushed against the wall and cuffed and stuff. Yeah. And she's just giving out to him, you fucking idiot, you stupid cunt. Why did you tell them, that stuff? I think that's so good. It's so real, and the way that whole bit is shot, all the real close cuts and the whip pans, and it's all super chaotic. And I think there is a conversation that should be had, maybe not by us because we're not that qualified to have it, maybe, about the optics of her family being subservient to the Master, and the fact that they're all dressed as, maids and stuff, cleaners and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And, I don't know if enough time is spent sort of, maybe not analysing, but reflecting on what they've just been through as a family. I don't know if that's something they should have focused a bit more time on, is the effects of all this, because Francine makes a big deal of we're the only people that will remember what happened.
And this is something that I've got in my notes for later on, which we'll come to when we get to the end, because it was something that I also felt was, having watched it again after so long, it was like, oh, it feels odd that, that's not addressed. But yeah, I mean, all the stuff with the family and, being on the run, all brilliant. Love all that stuff. Then, of course, like you said, it comes to a big head when we get the phone call between the Master and the Doctor. And it works so well, because that is the moment that we're all waiting for, isn't it? We spend the whole of the opening of the episode thinking, oh, when are the Doctor and the Master going to meet? It's a very clever way keeping them apart for as long. And like you said, they're still apart even in this scene, but it works beautifully. And it becomes more intimate, doesn't it? Then the Master drops a lot of the facade, and it just becomes about these two old enemies or two old frenemies. And it is fantastic. It's a really, really powerful scene. And the Doctor trying to appeal to the Master's better nature, which ultimately is never going to work. But again, a lot of good fun lines in that bit, like when the Doctor destroys the CCTV And he's like, "Oh, you public menace is great. I love it." There's some good little bits in there.
You do get the impression the Master, even at that point, has won, and that the Doctor's it's going to be a real struggle. It's going to take something like some fucking biblical, mythical nonsense to defeat the Master here. But, I'm not sure the Doctor is quite capable of that. So we'll see how this gets resolved.
Yeah.
I was thinking as well, about all of these different elements we've had floating since, as you say, series 2 or at least the Christmas special that year, The Runaway Bride. All these elements that have been sort of bubbling away. Obviously, you get references to Harriet Jones and like before the number 10 being rebuilt and all of that. But the drum beat, you are not alone, the Saxon posters, all of it has been there. It's been established. It's not like we're suddenly coming into this episode and some MacGuffin has been invented. I suppose to a degree, and we'll get to it in part 2, you do have the anti-Time Lord gun, which does feel like a bit of a Moffat swerve, like, you thought that was important because I put importance on it. Well, more fool you. It's like, well, no, we had no reason to believe you were going to pull the rug out from underneath us. And that's quite prescient with what happened in the finale that we've just had in the Sutek finale, because there's a slight element of, we're going to put importance on this thing, but we're going to tell the audience that, it's your fault that you put importance on it and that you got invested in this, because it doesn't actually lead to anything.
It amounts to nothing.
But even like the Archangel network almost feels like it should be one extra element to this story too many. To just suddenly bring up. And I don't know if the Archangel network has been mentioned before, but the Master, Martha and Jack are like, oh no, everyone's got it. All the mobile networks carry Archangel, and the repeating signal. I mean, Russell has obviously lifted that for the giggle, just like straight out. That kind of pattern. That sort of you don't notice it. It's kind of hiding in plain sight. And all the perception filter stuff is great. But it doesn't feel like in that first part they're adding too much that we haven't already had set up. And I think that's why this works as it is. I think the problem with this story is when you start adding another villain into it that just don't quite work. And the Toclafane aren't remembered.
No.
They're not a critical part of this finale. They are just, we need a
something.
baddie.
We need something to do the
Master.
To do his dirty work, isn't it, really? We need some heavies. And it's crazy to think that the Toclafane were almost the Daleks, weren't they, for a brief period before they got the rights to use them. Can you imagine series 1 with the Toclafane rather than the Daleks? It would have been weird. Would have been really
odd.
Really weird. But thankfully that never happened. And we get some more great little callbacks. We got the Teletubbies bit. That's good fun. The Gallifrey stuff is, of course, amazing. I mean, I think
forever to be used in people's video montages on YouTube, like that, and that track is iconic. That whole moment is such a kind of wow. I mean, was that where that photo of David Tennant comes from, of him in the Time Lord garb?
Yeah. Because we were watching it, and I said to Annie, I was like, although she said something like, "Oh, where did they get those Time Lord robes?" I was like, "They got them from like the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition." I said, "Those are the original ones from the 80s, from like Arc of Infinity." She's like, "What?" And that's great. I remember seeing it, for the first time round and being blown away, because it's like, oh my God, Time Lords, proper Time Lords, and like proper Gallifrey, and the young Master's got the War Games Time Lord robes on. So there's this wonderful bit of continuity going on there, without like being, completely on your nose. You even get the bloody Seal of Rassilon has been snuck into the CGI. Don't know why they got rid of the Seal of Rassilon on the Time Lord robes. That was weird.
No.
But, glad that someone had the goodwill to put it in there somewhere because it.
And we've been building to finally seeing Gallifrey, the Doctor having been the last of the Time Lords from the start. And for a new audience that haven't seen endless, boring corridors and stuffy people walking around in robes, to see Gallifrey presented like that, it is a satisfying build-up of, I wonder what it looks like, I wonder what it's like.
Yeah.
And then you do see it, and it pays off. It's exactly as the Doctor described. And that iconic look of the domed citadel, and that just goes right through. It's such an iconic design and such an iconic look,
and that comes from,
it's never deviated from.
No, and that comes from like Doctor Who magazine in the 80s, I think, or the early 90s. Someone will correct me. So it's amazing, isn't it, that it's got all these little nods to other things. And like you said, from the way that the Doctor described it in Gridlock to Martha about the skies were burnt orange, which is a callback to Susan talking about the planet in the Sensorites. So it's great. It's like you said, it's a moment that it really feels like it pays off because we've built to that. As a general audience, it's a good payoff. For us sad bastards, it's a great payoff. It just really works.
Fantastic.
He didn't say that they're also known for their plastic furniture from IKEA that is like scattered through the corridors of Gallifrey. That was
no, sadly not.
Yeah.
It would have been great. Wouldn't it have been great if the Master, instead of using his laser screwdriver to mess the Doctor up, if he said, "Now, do you remember the mind probe?" And he brings it out and we finally see what it looks like. Oh my God, what a build-up for bloody 20 years. We finally see what this device looks like.
I have retrieved Commander Maxwell's helmet. Take your shoes off, prepare to be tickled.
So yeah, it's a very, very successful opening part.
Yeah.
And we have the setup of the Valiant being this, huge, almost Avengers style sort of machine in the sky.
It's Captain Scarlet, isn't it? Because Avengers haven't done it yet, so it's Captain Scarlet, which is
very Captain Scarlet, very Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
And it's a good location for a finale. It feels like a suitable place to do battle, and you don't mind so much that the Master basically spends his entire time on there, from President Winters getting assassinated through to now. But then I think the problem with Last of the Time Lords is the Toclafane, they've been built up as being kind of vicious and taking out people in nasty ways with their knives and all of that. Yeah. And the Master obviously has the whole place under martial law and blah, blah, blah. But as good as the stuff is with Martha kind of roaming the world solo, it does feel... I don't know if I totally buy it, with the Toclafane having enslaved everyone. And I think the fact that the Master spends his entire time on the Valiant.
Yeah.
It's difficult to feel like he's, I suppose, you do get the messages he's sending through on analog signals and all of that. And he's obviously got people that will bait others out for information and promises of safety, and because you have that with Dr. Doherty in part 2. But where does it, for you in part 2, where does it start to kind of crumble a little bit? Because we've been praising it up to this point, but obviously I know that it's one that you have reservations with.
Well, yeah, I mean, and watching it was just like, I didn't even mind all of the stuff with Martha. I did laugh. I said how, Martha's been on the run for a year, and she's become this legend, and they talk about that she's been through all this, and like she's the only one who escaped from wherever alive, and all this stuff. Hair's beautiful. She's got full face of makeup on. Stunning. It's mad.
She knew she was going to meet up with Tom Milligan, so she's got to make a bit of an effort.
Yeah. But I mean, I think Russell, obviously, the budget is stretched enough as it is. I think Russell does do quite a good job with the way he creates that world with all the little things that they talk about. I mean, I've got stuff written down here about all the radiation pits of Europe and the wild dogs roaming the streets of London and Japan being wiped out. I think
totally
Martha's sister
annihilated.
says something like, "Oh, he made us watch."
We watched it.
Yeah. So all these things, you know, and I think that he does do a good job with that sort of stuff. But I can kind of see what you mean. It would have been maybe nice to have just seen some little flashes of stuff that had happened. Or like you said, maybe the Master needed to be less isolated to just being on the Valiant. You know, I get that he's, you know, lording over the planet, but...
Or if we did it in a kind of First Order rally, I mean, I know that's not, you know, the First Order isn't the group that popularized that kind of rally.
Yes.
But, you know, if it was done in that way, or almost in the way that with the Hunger Games, like, I don't know the name of the players in that, but, the omnipotent sort of oligarchs in that, you know, the way they lord over people, and maybe having more of an idea that the Master is willing to go to any level to track down Martha Jones, and you know, there's a healthy reward in it for you, and she is public enemy number one if she was on a big poster or something. It would have been nice if it was less of a he is walking amongst us just that one time, and then, because especially at the end when the Doctor and the Master have their kind of weird quote unquote confrontation on Earth around all the rockets, which just doesn't work. That whole bit just feels really, you know, they don't have a fist fight, which you wouldn't expect necessarily, but they also don't have a huge, you've got to stop this, you know, think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that when you have those two moments where the Master does have boots on the ground, it does feel like he's been largely absent from maintaining this hold he's got over everyone.
That was the one thing I think that I didn't quite buy. It's like, why hasn't the Master gone to more of an effort to stop her? You know, even not just stop her, just because, you know, he wants the Doctor to suffer. Why wouldn't he just get hold of her and torture her or whatever for the Doctor's punishment? So that doesn't quite work for me. And like you said, that bit at the end. Obviously, we have the whole bit about the Doctor aging with the laser screwdriver. Great prosthetics, and I think
still look great.
David does a wonderful job of conveying he is now, however much older he's meant to be. That stuff I love. You know, I think that's great. The way that the Master treats the Doctor. There's that bit when they try and do that initial escape plan, when they're doing like the coded signals with the fingers. And you know, the Master smacks him in the face, which is great. And it's even more unpleasant because the Doctor's now an old man. You know, and it's always upsetting to see.
I had to laugh. I'm not for elder abuse in the slightest. But I did have to. Yeah, just putting it out there. I did laugh when he pushes the Doctor in his chair and he just sort of, and he casually bumps into the wall.
Yeah.
Completely stony faced. It did make me giggle a little bit.
I mean, all that stuff is great, and you know, we've had all that stuff beforehand as well. When the Master finally takes control. You know, the people of the Earth, please attend. You know, there's some nice little callbacks to stuff there, which work well. What do you think?
He really relishes saying it, doesn't he?
Yes, it's really good. It's really good. That whole bit when President Winters gets killed is kind of ruined by the appalling extras that when they cut to America, the American people watching, and is like, we'll just have a room and we'll put them in like those...
Buffalo Bills jerseys.
Yeah, the jackets and all those sort of things. It's like, how can we make them look American?
They're eating junk food and they're wearing US sports team shirts. One of them should have had one of those 10-gallon hats on. And, well, hot diggity dandy. I guess we're subservient to the British again.
So, I mean, that stuff's all good fun. What did you think about the Voodoo Child... Here come the drums.
I mean, that and Scissor Sisters. The Here Come the Drums one feels a bit more egregious because it's just a way to, you know, slam into the to be continued, and you know, it doesn't quite work for me. But
no, I agree.
It's a typically Russell move, isn't it now?
Yeah.
When you think of, you know, the use of music like that, and obviously we've had a lot of it in this past series. But I think it works, the Scissor Sisters one.
I prefer the Scissor Sisters one as well, yeah.
Yeah, A, it's a banger.
Yes.
And also, B, you kind of think...
What else did they do? I was saying to Annie, I was like, Scissor Sisters, what was there? There was, I mean, they had a few songs, but...
Oh, I was going to sing one, but I realised it was Mika.
Oh, yeah, same.
They had like one or two others.
Yeah, they did, didn't they? And I was like, oh, I've forgotten about them.
There'll be one of them that, as soon as I say the name of the song, you'll be like,
oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, that one. But again, it does tie into the idea that the master has won and he's relishing
the
so I like it. Oh, I don't feel like dancing. There's another one.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's that one I know.
They did a disco version of Comfortably Numb. Oh my God, I've got to listen to that at some point. Yeah, they had a couple. But the master's plan, it's never I just want to be on high, like that's generally the master's plan, and he'll use anyone and anything to get there. He's used the Daleks before. He's he's done this kind of thing before. What I don't quite get, because everything sort of holds together, even with the Toclafane and they're future humans, so coming back and wiping out their ancestors. How does that make sense? Oh, but hang on, he's butchered the TARDIS and it's become a paradox machine. And I immediately thought of the Series 3 DVD menu.
Oh, yeah.
Where you have the butchered TARDIS.
That was really cool. I forgot about that. But I love that set, because it's like, well, we don't really want to damage the set because we need this and we can't pull the console out. So why don't we just put some tubes and some sparkly lights and put some big grating around it, and that'll do.
It, yeah. It works. I think it looks cool, and the lighting looks cool in there as well.
Yeah.
But so it all holds up, and I'm following it all, up to the point where the rockets appear, and Tom Milligan is talking about, because I don't know the actor's name. I know he's done a lot of good stuff, but I can't remember his name.
I literally had him written down as Lucifer.
Lucifer, that's him, yeah. Does he come back for Series 4 finale as well? There's like a little cameo to welcome Martha back, or is he mentioned? He's just mentioned, isn't he?
I think he's mentioned, and then Annie reminded me that in the end of time, her and Mickey are together.
Yes.
Why the fuck
because
did they do that?
It's like Star Wars. It's like, the one black person in the universe, Lando Calrissian. It's like the two black people in the universe obviously have to get together. That's just the way it works. It's very
weird.
J.K. Rowling, having a Scottish character, Ockeye whoops a daisy or whatever. It's very kind of...
It was a bit
weird.
Don't
know about that.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But I'm with this story right up to the point where we have the rockets and we're going to war with the universe and all of that. And I think at that point, I just ask, so what is the plan? Why has the master decided to do this here?
Yeah.
What are the Toclafane getting out of constructing or being part of this plan? I guess they're being freed from their inevitable end in Utopia, because obviously it's revealed that they are, the little Davros head in the ball is the Blue Peter competition winner. What a way to go.
Yeah.
We're going to butcher your child and have his head. It's a puppet, is it? Wow.
It's a very good puppet, yeah. And
I didn't realise.
A great sequence, that, because you are...
Yes.
It's kind of like the opening of a Dalek, isn't it? You're waiting, that build-up to see what's inside. Really cool. I remember it was quite unsettling, those sort of like milky eyes staring back at you, and it's quite creepy.
Did they ever release a toy version with the opened head?
They did. You could get Martha Jones in her like combat fatigues with the open Toclafane. Yeah. Nice.
Did they ever do a closed Toclafane?
They did. 2 closed Toclafane came with the Master. And they were also going to do, but it never came out, they were also going to do a Toclafane with all the little spikes and needles pointing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
There's a prototype of it, or there was. But it never came to fruition, unfortunately.
What a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where the story loses me, is I don't get the we're going to war with the universe thing.
Yeah, it does seem a bit odd. And I kind of forgotten about that until watching it the other day. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
Because it's not like, imagine if the Master had been running away from, not the Time Lords, but the Shadow Proclamation or whatever, or the Galactic Federation, and they'd finally tracked him down.
Yeah.
And they're like, by hook or by crook, even if we destroy that world, we have to get rid of this guy. And so it would make sense that he turns the Earth into sort of his final stand, and he's got an arsenal behind him to wipe them out or whatever. But he doesn't seem to be going for any one in particular. He's just, this is where I stage universal domination from.
Yeah.
And that's a very Master thing. But why it has to be Earth and why he has to create these shipping yards and all of that, I don't quite get it.
Yeah, it's a bit odd, but I was just looking at my notes and something just stuck out to me when Martha's telling her story to those people, and or it might be Tom Milligan talking about her journey across the continents, and it cuts to a shot of Freema Agyeman in like a bloody quarry with a wind machine going like that, and it was like, see, that's Doctor Who. That's Doctor Who in a nutshell. We haven't got two ape knees to scrape together. So just stick her around the back, put a fan in her face. That'll do.
That'll do. That'll illustrate everything she's been through. And I remember when she mentions I've been away for a year or whatever, and straight away thinking, oh, they'll do that at some point, won't they? They'll do, maybe not a spin-off, but that'll be elaborated on. And obviously they had a book, didn't they? And there was a Big Finish audio. I think there was a book that was like the year of Martha Jones or something like that. I remember seeing a book cover with just her on it.
Oh, probably then. Yeah, that now that you mentioned it, that does ring a bell. Yeah, it does. I mean, it does feel like it's rife for the picking, especially if you're bloody Big Finish. I mean, for me, stuff that doesn't work. I mean, the Dobby Doctor. That's weird. That's like, you've gone a bit too far, because the CGI, it isn't bad, but it's not great. But it just, one of the best. You've got two fantastic actors here. You've got two of like TV's biggest actors at this point, David Tennant and John Sim, and they can't act against each other because you've turned one of them into CGI Yoda. Which
and
is
it takes
shame.
The Doctor out of that story again, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and all I could think of, like, well, who made his little suit? Was Martha's mum
it's
making his little outfit?
It's the same pinstripe jacket.
Did she like butcher his pinstripe jacket and sew it together? And then how does it come back when the Archangel Network resurrects him?
I love the idea that as he's floating, you get a reverse shot of him flying towards the Master, and there's like a perfectly cut jacket and trousers at the back of his suit jacket. Just like a little hole, and you can see his shirt beneath it. Yeah.
Assless chaps.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I don't know. I don't know that it works, and
it's so good when you have that moment when he's just old Doctor, and the Master's like, I remember the days when you were battling Axons and Sea Devils and all this sort of stuff, and it's like, this is good. And then once he becomes Dobby Doctor, like I said, it takes him out of it even more. He's not been present in the story that much. The Doctor, but then that really takes him out of it, and it just seems like an unnecessary extension of that. Another bit that annoyed me was Martha Jones saying about, there was this one man once. I was like, for God's sake, Martha, it's been all this time. You're interested.
They even you call back to it in part 1 where, that perception filter's like when, you fancy someone and they just don't see you.
Yeah.
And also, the 10th Doctor's treatment of Martha is like an ongoing discourse, and people talk about it quite a lot. And, I think it's in the text, but it does almost feel like Russell's got to the end of the series and they're like, well, Martha's a companion for 1 year, and I'll have a scene where we kind of reference the fact that she's not been, I don't know what the right word is. I don't know if it's not treated very well or whatever it is. She's kind of been ignored by him.
Yeah.
But they even reference it at the top of the first episode where Jack has to explain to Martha what regeneration is. That the Doctor hasn't had that conversation with her.
No.
And that's always treated like a kind of, he opens up to her about being the last of the Time Lords and all of that. Yeah. But at no point after that, the conversation led to, so what are Gallifreyans? What are Time Lords? And It does feel like a bit of, oh, fuck, yeah, we haven't had that scene. Jack's going to have to explain it to her. But why Jack? Why doesn't wasn't the Doctor just say, we can change our faces, by the way?
But I wonder if that is, again, is that just another aspect of the Doctor just isn't that close to her? I don't know.
It helps to make her eventual decision to bugger off work, but I don't think it's intended,
No. We obviously, Captain Jack, we literally haven't mentioned Captain Jack.
Funny that.
Yeah. He's all right in this episode.
Yeah, he gets his shots where he fires off a machine gun. He does all the classic Jack stuff. He's shot and brought back to life and all of that. It's helpful from a mechanical script perspective to have somebody somewhere else that can be instigating stuff or that can be the one who gets his hands dirty and kills a bunch of people and blah blah blah. But he really is just that. He's another person to. Well, he's not even necessarily another person to ask questions because he's already so informed about the Doctor and even Harold Saxon and all of that, that he just becomes another person for Martha to ask questions to or get confirmation from. And do all the running and gunning. But I suppose you need that. And for what it's worth, John Barrowman is good in this as Captain Jack.
Yeah. For sure. One thing that did make me laugh was when the Master says something like, and tell Captain Jack that I've sent his little band off on a mission to the Himalayas. I was like, the Himalayas? Really? On Torchwood's budget? I don't think so, somehow.
Well, they just go to Snowdonia again like Doctor Who did, and I wonder what that adventure was. I mean, it's certainly a Yeti, but knowing Torchwood, it's probably a Yeti that took some fucking space Viagra and has gone nuts, sort of shagging the local wildlife to death or something.
Don't say that. That's going to be a bloody Big Finish episode now. And they don't need John Barrowman in it, so there we go.
No, true.
Brandy Yetis.
Ah, yeah. Why don't they just do that? Why don't they just go through Doctor Who with a fine-tooth comb and just do the stories that are referenced off screen, on screen that happened elsewhere? Yeah. Have we ever got the terrible Zodin as a Big Finish story?
I don't think they've ever done terrible Zodin.
That's a great way to fill in the gaps because it doesn't necessarily mean you're having to chisel fucking chasms in between adventures to fill the void with these stories and chuck loads of companions in it. I don't know. Anyway, this isn't a Big Finish rant.
No. I mean, really.
Shall we?
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No. Go on. Do your bit. I was just going to say, shall we start winding our way down towards the Jesus stuff?
Yeah, that was literally my next point. It was like, this is where it all starts to go wrong for me. You've got the literal Tom Baker, think of Jesus. Think of me.
Yes. Or is the Doctor God and Martha is Jesus?
Oh, that's...
Because she's walking the earth.
Yeah.
And there's lines that are quite, overt. I've been spreading his message.
Yes.
And his, him, they, this omnipotent.
Yeah. And, she's a disciple, isn't she? It's really funny, and I think it's even especially funnier given we've just had Boom, which I think Russell's an atheist. I'm sure he said it in the past, but I remember everyone sort of said this is quite weirdly. There's this weird sort of religious side of things here for someone who's an atheist. And then obviously with Boom, this whole thing was about, faith's a load of old tosh, basically. And yet here, faith saves the day. Again, it's one of those stories because it's not only Martha's faith, but it's the faith of the human race in the Doctor that Martha has instilled in them all that makes him is resurrected. Again, it's even more sort of messianic biblical imagery. It's very weird.
It's lucky that the Toffolo took out 1/10 of the population, so Martha had a few less people to knock on doors for to spread the message.
Yeah.
You know, did she have pamphlets?
Well,
Excuse me. Are you religious? We're not actually a religious household. No. Well, I'd like to spread the good word about the doctor.
Have you heard have you heard the message of the doctor?
Yeah. And the Archangel Network thing is kind of it's useful to have so that it isn't just the power of faith that's making the doctor hover.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a Doctor Who-y, tangible, sciencey thing happening, but
not
it's
like
just
nowadays. It would just be, well, it's Doctor Who, and if I say that people can think of the Doctor and he just turns into Super Jesus, then that's what I have to say. So
exactly,
get on with it.
Do you remember any of the discourse at the time being about overt religious context? Because to be fair, it's happened in this series before. Like Gridlock is all about faith and people being together and the whole abide with me thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? I can certainly remember people talking about it. Because I think people made the same comparison of like, oh, it's very odd that someone who's an atheist has, done this whole thing, which is so sort of like quasi-religious or quasi-faith. It's weird. But I mean, I just don't know why it gives him God powers. The whole thing's weird, isn't it? I also hate the fact when the Doctor turns around and says to the Master, he's like, oh, you know what I'm going to say. And like, he's been building up to it throughout the episode. He says, oh, I've only got one thing to say to you. And then it's, I forgive you. Again, a very Jesus thing to do. But if I was Martha Jones and if I was Martha's mum and everyone else, I'd be like, fuck off. He's just wiped out 1/10 of the population. We've seen bloody the coast of Japan completely wiped out. We've been his bloody slaves for the last year, wiping his arse and God knows what else.
I've been having to rub his feet, you know. I've been worried about what he's going to do to me and my mum, but for some reason he's only really interested in that stuff with Dad, and Dad actually kind of enjoys it. As long as Lucy's watching. They don't feel like they get their day, the Joneses.
No,
they just feel like they've just been put through this and they don't even get the satisfaction of pulling the trigger. And I do like the fact it is Lucy that does it.
Yeah.
But what if, Lucy pumped around into him and then she passes it to Francine and Francine has a go and then Tish has a go and then Reggie Yates turns up and goes bang, that was a fucking blast from the past seeing him pop up.
I'd completely forgotten that he was Martha's brother. That was so weird.
And how obvious it is that, I've got commitments doing Top of the Pops or, did he have his radio? Was he doing Radio 1 at the time or?
I can't remember. He was quite big though, wasn't he, at the time?
He was definitely one of those, I can't disassociate him from being Reggie Yates on this show. And his calendar was obviously so full that he only made sort of cameo appearances. But because it's cameo appearances, you just go, it's just Reggie Yates. Reggie Yates is Martha's brother. It's not Leo. Who's Leo?
It's really, 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 really weird. I just don't get I don't get the I forgive you thing. I put in my notes was like, it might work when Roger Delgado does something and he's been a little bit naughty, but when he's like literally taken over the planet and done mass genocide and God knows what else, then I mean, it's not like in Logopolis, Tom Baker's going to grapple Anthony Ainley and say, but I forgive you. I think the Doctor's ready to fucking push him off that radio telescope.
Well, it would be great if the Doctor did do that and then Ainley just palm strikes him off the telescope anyway, Like, I don't have time for that shit. I've just got an image in my head now of the Joneses taking a turn, like kicking him in the balls or something. Just like, just kicking him in the head, each taking their turn, lining up.
It's like that bit in Bottom, isn't it, with the gas man when, it was a punch and then a frying pan.
It would have been cathartic for them.
It would have been.
I have to be honest here and say that when I wrote my notes yesterday, I wasn't in a place with great Wi-Fi. So I'm only remembering the ending from memory.
Right, yeah.
So because it cut off around the time that the Master gets cuffed by Jack, and you know that obviously Lucy's gonna shoot him.
Yeah.
But what more closure do the Joneses get to all of this? Do they not appear again after the Valiant stuff?
So that is literally it. So yeah, you've had that bit with the Doctor and the Master going down to the rockets, which is weird. It seems pretty pointless because they don't really do anything there, and it looks awful. The picture's really
it's
bad.
So washed out. Yeah,
it looks shit.
Didn't they had a really sunny day or something, and they thought we need to make this look apocalyptic, and they just sucked all the colour out of the picture.
It's really bizarre. I also noticed another error when the Doctor is flying towards the Master. In one of those shots, you can see a huge hole in the Valiant set, and you can see all the underneath of, that sort of like balcony area that he keeps walking up to. You can see all of the bare boards underneath and all of the cables with the cable ties.
Oh my God, wow.
I was like, I love it. I love it.
Well, it's Unit that's built it. Of course it's done on a budget. They're a civil service.
But in terms of the Joneses, they get nothing. The Doctor goes to the house to pick up Martha, and you see Francine through the window, and she sort of gives him a look, and she sort of gives a reluctant smile, and that's it. It's only until Martha gives him the speech, and then she goes back to the house. We have nothing with them, and that is literally what I've got here in my notes, where. I mean, there's a lot of weird bits, isn't there? We've got the funeral pyre bit with the Master, which is very Return of the Jedi, burning Darth Vader. The woman's hand picking up the ring with the Master's laugh, which is very Flash Gordon with Ming the Merciless, which is great fun. What do you think about the Master not regenerating? It feels like something the Master would do.
Yeah, I do like it. It does feel like a final victory. It's like, okay, you may have foiled me again, but I can at least get this one over on you. And the fact that it affects the Doctor.
Yeah, because he's the last one. It's good.
Exactly.
It works. I like that. Although when the Master dies, he does sort of go a bit cross-eyed when his eyes roll back, and there's a bit of a weird gurning expression on John Sims' face, and it makes me laugh more than anything. But
I think that does happen when Time Lords can regenerate but don't. They do what humans do, and they just evacuate themselves.
Yes. Do you think that's what happens?
I think there's just a big,
David
long...
Tennant's lap.
Yeah, it's a big, long... that's been cut.
I just got these trousers back to normal.
Yeah, just as the Master fills his undies, with a big load. I don't think that they could have done that any better, really. And obviously it leads the door open for him to come back, and
which is another
the ring being retrieved.
Annie said to me, she was like, I forget how the Master comes back. And I was like, don't even go there. Do not even go there with how the Master comes back. It's shit. Then we have the whole Captain Jack thing with the face of Bo. Which is funny, and it's there's a weird scene, Matt, because the Doctor takes off his vortex manipulator and says, "No, I can't let you have that fully working," and all this sort of stuff, and it feels like that is a natural end to the conversation. They're like, right, cheerio, bye, and Jack starts walking away. And then he stops, and then he turns around, and then he starts giving us his life story, and it cuts back to David and Freema, and they both look like, oh, fuck me, why is he doing this? And it feels, you sort of feel it. You're like, oh my God, what's going on? But yeah, the face of Bo thing, that was weird, but hey.
I think it was another one of those things where Russell maybe got to the end of it and went, oh, I guess the Bo thing's kind of unresolved. What if Jack became the face of Bo? That's a great idea. I love it. Put it in. And it does feel like a kind of afterthought.
Where's that Big Finish box set?
Yeah. What all the plastic surgery Jack has to get done to become a big head.
To become just a big head, yeah. And lose his accent.
And lose his accent for some reason, yeah. I think, I like it. I like the idea because it's so Doctor Who. It's like, how did he get from there to there? Yeah. It just happens. It happens over millions of years, billions of years, or however long.
That's what happens when you can't die.
one last thing about Jack as well, and it's going back to part one. Sorry for backtracking, but I loved the line when Jack, they've all got the perception filter on and they're watching the Master meet with the US president. And Jack goes, what if I go up behind him and snap his neck? And the Doctor goes, very Torchwood. And it's like, it is, because they get away with it on that show, but you don't do it here, mate. Not on my programme. You're not going to be, going up behind him, snapping his neck and then shagging his corpse afterwards. It's not going to happen. That's very Torchwood. And then we have Martha leaving.
And this is, I love that Martha gets to have her moment to shine and say, you know what? This ain't working, but I'd never really thought about it before, but this time watching it, I was a bit disappointed because it all goes back to her saying like, oh, so I had this mate and she fancied this guy and blah, 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 blah. And I was thinking, bollocks, this whole year has happened as far as she's concerned and the Joneses are concerned. And her big issue is that she's following the Doctor around like a sad puppy, and he won't give her the time of day, and he's not giving her puppy eyes. Bugger that. What about all the shit that her family's gone through? Because the Doctor's just like, oh, yeah, okay, right, let's go and meet Agatha Christie. Oh, she'd be good, wouldn't she? And he's bouncing around like Tigger as if nothing has happened. And I just thought, oh, wouldn't it have been amazing if Martha had been like, are you for real?
Yeah.
My family has just been through all this stuff, and you're just like, oh, all right, on to the next thing. No way.
And still, just what it comes down to her is, like you say, just not being acknowledged and him not being in love with her.
Yeah, that is like the big takeaway from it all. And I'm like, no. Talk about your family. Talk about, Tish is in fucking therapy. She can't sleep. She's having nightmares or whatever. Build it up and maybe have Martha say, like, you know what, you need to take a look at yourself. You need to really take a look at yourself and think about this life that you lead. Because they make a big point of it with, like, other companions have said it. I think Donna says it, doesn't she? About, like, you need someone. You've got to have someone. I was just about to say,
it kills two birds with one stone because the Doctor then gets a mate and they are exactly what he needs. He doesn't need like a love interest that he can kind of dangle on the end of a thread. Yes. He needs somebody that can keep him in check, and he doesn't respect Martha enough or give her enough attention for her to be that person, and that's why she leaves. But as you say, if she'd also said it's not just that, but it's what we've just been through and the fact my family, I have to stay here and look after them because they're the only ones that remember what happened.
Yeah.
Then you do get a sense of what they've been through, which up to this point is absent. Yeah. That they've been through anything major.
Yeah, it feels like that is a major shortcoming of this. And it just feels like, it would have been such a powerful moment for her to really be like, nah, bollocks to you, mister. But,
It does feel like Rose was sort of Russell's magnum opus when it comes to writing a companion.
Yeah.
And he tried... It's like Martha was him trying to write someone completely different.
Yeah.
Who did fawn. And we haven't really had that with the Doctor before. Somebody who just adores him and dotes on him, and he just sees right through her.
Yeah.
But you don't get the sense that the Doctor is told off enough about that. It's not like there's a scene the following season where he's talking with Donna, and considering how much he was reflecting on Rose not being there through series 3, he doesn't have a kind of realization of, I should have done better with Martha the following year.
Yeah,
and Martha is basically wiped out of not continuity because obviously she comes back and all of that, but she is kind of wiped from the Doctor's adventure, and how he becomes the person he is,
Yeah, you almost wish that in the Sontaran 2-parter, he had a moment with Donna where he just sort of said, she travelled with me, but, it ended badly, or, I didn't treat her as well as I should have done.
Yeah, because they don't have any kind of sense of closure, those two, in that episode, do they? Like, Martha doesn't talk to him about anything, or I guess it wasn't something that Russell worried about particularly, and I'm sure he doesn't worry about it now, which is fine. Yeah. But I think looking back on it, it's a misstep. Yeah. That whole that whole relationship.
Yeah. And I just think the problem is I mean, it's the same issue that we had with the Series 14 finale, is that it's one of those stories where the stakes throughout this episode have been raised so high that there is nothing you can do but reverse time, put the toys back in the box, and have everything like it never happened. Which is a shame, you know. And I think the fact that even the Joneses don't get to have their moment because they're the ones that remember makes it feel even weaker because of it. I think even if you could have had that powerful ending, it might have justified it that little bit more. But again, you know, it's the same as what we've seen the other week. So, you know, that's just one of his things, I guess.
It is. Well, now you've mentioned it, you know, when we finished the Series 14 reviews and the last episode went out, I was thinking, you know, is this, I mean, it is Russell's weakest finale.
Yes.
Possibly his weakest season, although I think that Series 2 might have something to say about that as well.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think there's some stronger stories overall in Series 2.
But is there anything on a level of like 73 yards? Like nothing quite reaches that level of...
I mean, I would sooner watch like the Satan Pit over 73 yards.
Yeah, that's a good story.
I mean, I enjoy Doomsday as a finale. I can't. Oh, School Reunion. That's obviously great fun. With Sarah Jane coming back.
The Cyberman two-parter isn't terrible. It's just that it does. The origin of the Cybermen isn't. Yeah. I mean, it's not that it isn't even that good. It's just different. And I think when you want the Cybermen to come back, you want them to be how they're perceived in the classic series, which is not how they. You know, that episode sets them up to be just stompy robots forever. You know, and
that is the shortcoming of that episode. But
casts a bit of a shadow.
Yeah, I don't mind. Like you said, I don't mind that two-parter at all. You know, I think had it have just been these happen to be Cybermen from a parallel universe, I think that would have worked. And I mean, it sets up the finale. So yeah, I don't mind that one either. I think I'd probably sooner take Series 2. Yeah, easily. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because that's our next episode, talking about Series 14.
Yes. Oh, dear.
So, any closing thoughts on Last of the Time Lord Sound of Drums? I mean, it's basically history repeating itself, really, isn't it? With the current finale that we just had, is that the first part really strong, and then the latter part just takes a bit of a nosedive. I don't think this one is quite as big a nosedive as the other one, as the Sutek one. I mean, Sutek one is fucking... That was off a cliff into the depths of the earth, out the other end, into space. This one, at least, so it kind of sticks the landing a little bit, but yeah.
Do you think it sticks the landing more than Series 4's finale? Because that's not as much a nosedive as it is a tonal shift or a shift in perspective. You know, it's not like the quality necessarily dips. It's just that the story kind of changes.
Yes, the story ends very quickly. Which is something that he seems to like doing, isn't it? He's like, oh, I'm not really interested in that. I want to focus on this thing. And then, with Journey's End, you get that whole thing of like, oh, let's go and say goodbye to everybody and all this sort of stuff. They're like, oh, okay, but I wanted to see more stuff with Davros. It's kind of like he's not really interested in that aspect.
It's the same as Sutek. Like, I want to see more of Sutek, and actually that's not what I'm interested in doing, which is fine. Yeah. But I think then come up with a villain that people don't mind seeing less of.
Because, I mean, I certainly think Journey's End is worse in terms of resolution, because it is literally... let's flick some buttons and switch off the Daleks and the day is saved, you know? And it's like, wow, really? That's it? You're going to flick some buttons and that's the end? At least this one feels like it was leading up to something, and that the seeds of the Master's downfall had been sown earlier on through the Archangel network and all that sort of stuff, and and Martha telling the Doctor's story and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think this one isn't as bad, but it ain't great.
No, and I've got very fond memories of it. I think series 2, it was so Rose-centric, that finale, that the story takes a bit of a backseat, whereas here you don't have the companion angst to distract from whatever story they're trying to tell. And on the whole, I think the story works, and I really love that first part. I think that first part is pretty faultless, really.
Yeah.
It's just when you get to the resolution in part 2, and you have to have the big reset button, and that was an edict that they had. All the writers were told.
Yes. Yeah.
So Russell's only following his own advice.
Yeah.
So at least he's sticking to that principle of, at the end of the story, everything has to go back in the box.
Yeah.
But I think for a finale, you should that raises the stakes to another level, because you're not playing by your own rules necessarily, or whatever it is. And I think maybe it would have been good to deviate from that structure or that line of thinking, because you do just end up with quite a few unresolved threads that are more interesting than just having the image of the Doctor saving the day like that. Like, we have foregone the Joneses and what they've been through, and even to a degree what the Earth has been through, and how it gets put back together at the end. Because Russell, up to this point, has been all about continuity of what's happened on Earth prior to this and how it's all tied up.
Yeah.
And this is the first time where he's kind of gone, oh, none of that matters. We'll just go back to exactly as it was just after the president is assassinated.
Yeah.
But the world still saw that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
there's a power vacuum there, isn't there? Like what
exactly?
What happens next?
Yeah, maybe that allows somebody else to come in. That could have tied into the year afterwards, because it's like the ongoing threads stop here.
Yes.
And series 4 is like a new start.
It really feels like that, doesn't it? Series 4. It feels sort of a little bit separate from the previous 3. Do you want to give it an out of 10? I will give it, on the whole, I will give it 6.5, maybe 7 rampaging Yeti cocks out of 10. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, 6.5, 7. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Nice.
Right. Well, thank you all for listening or watching. If you haven't gone and voted, go and do it. Do it now. Unless it's not the 4th of July, then you've missed your chance. But yes, don't vote Saxon, because he's a prick. Or don't vote for the party he represents either.
No. Whoever they may be.
Whoever they may be. Yes, so thank you all for watching and listening. Like and subscribe, all those wonderful things that help us to keep making this content. And we'll see you all in a fortnight's time for our Series 14 Roundup. Was it good? Was it bad? We'll let you know. Until then, bye-bye.
It was bad. Bye.